The Young and the Restless spoilers Saturday's full episodes August 9, 2025. The breeze from the Abbott Winters patio carried the scent of old roses and a tension Lily hadn't felt in months. She had returned to Genoa City to reclaim a sense of peace, to refocus on her company, her family, and her future, but the moment her feet touched familiar ground, it was as though the ghosts of her past had been waiting for her at the gates. Most pressing among them was Kane, who had slipped back into town like a shadow, leaving whispers and unease in his wake. She had no intention of seeing him, not now, not ever again, or so she told herself. But the moment Devon mentioned his name, everything she thought she had buried surged back to the surface like a wound reopened. They were sitting together in her office at Chancellor Winters when Devon gently steered the conversation toward Kane. His tone wasn't accusatory or nostalgic, just measured, the way only a brother could speak when trying to protect someone he loved without stepping too far. "You know he still loves you, right?" he said, watching her reaction with care. "He might not say it the way you want, but I think Kane's feelings have always been real. The man's made every mistake possible, but that part's never changed." Lily looked away, focusing on the window instead of Devon's face. The city stretched beyond the glass, polished and distant, not unlike her emotions. She had loved Kane once recklessly, deeply, with everything she had. But that love had nearly broken her. Devon continued, "I don't think he's here just to stir up trouble. But I also don't think he'll let you go that easily. Not now that he's back." Before she could respond, Victor arrived. He moved through the halls of Chancellor Winters like a man who owned every square foot of the building. Perhaps in some way, he did. Victor's influence didn't need formal titles or contracts, it existed in the way people moved aside when he entered a room, in the way conversations shifted course the moment his name was mentioned. When he entered Lily's office unannounced, she straightened her posture instinctively. Devon, wary but composed, offered a courteous nod. Victor ignored him. His attention was solely on Lily. "I hear Kane's in town," Victor said, his voice smooth and devoid of preamble. Lily's jaw tensed. "I have no plans to see him," she replied firmly. "I intend to avoid him at all costs." Victor raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching into something almost resembling amusement. "You might want to reconsider," he said. "He's not here for nothing. Men like Kane, they don't move without purpose. The question is whether that purpose threatens you, or Winters." Lily narrowed her eyes, unsure if she was being warned or baited. Victor continued, "If Kane believes he has a chance with you, he might let his guard down. He might say things he wouldn't say otherwise. Information is power, Lily. You've always understood that." She stared at him, disbelief flickering beneath her frustration. "You're suggesting I pretend to be interested in Kane again, to manipulate him?" she asked. Victor didn't flinch. "I'm suggesting you protect what's yours," he said simply, then turned and left the room without another word. The silence he left behind was suffocating. Devon closed the door after him, his expression unreadable. Lily sat down slowly, her mind spinning. "Do you think Kane is a threat to the company?" she asked, almost to herself. Devon didn't answer right away. "I think Kane's unpredictable," he finally said. "And I think Victor is using you like he uses everyone. But that doesn't mean he's wrong. You're the only one Kane still listens to, even when he pretends otherwise." Lily looked up at her brother, her voice softer now. "What if I can't do it? What if I can't fake it well enough?" Devon's eyes were gentle. "Then don't fake it. Just talk to him. See what he's planning. But be careful. Kane's always been his own worst enemy, and yours too." Elsewhere in Genoa City, other power plays were quietly unfolding. At Society, Sally sat across from Audra, offering her something that looked like a lifeline, or perhaps a trap. "You're smart, you're ambitious, and you're about to be unemployed unless you make your next move carefully," Sally said, sliding a folder across the table. "Come work for me at Abbott Communications. Billy might be gone, but I have plans, and I could use someone with your instincts, provided you're loyal to me, not to the highest bidder. Audra glanced down at the folder, then back up at Sally with the hint of a smirk. You're not exactly known for loyalty yourself, she said. That's why I know how important it is, Sally replied. Audra didn't answer. She just tapped her fingers against her glass, already calculating her next play. And on the edge of town, Adam Newman stood firm in a different kind of defiance. Victor had made him an offer, something strategic, transactional, loaded with unspoken strings. And Adam had said no. Not because he didn't want to win, but because for the first time in a long time, he wanted to win on his own terms. He didn't trust the deal. He didn't trust the timing. And more importantly, he didn't trust Victor's sudden interest in Lily. It wasn't about romance, Adam knew. It was about control, of her, of Winters, of the family legacy Victor never stopped trying to dominate. Refusing the offer meant isolation, maybe even retribution, but Adam had grown used to being the outlier. Sometimes survival meant saying no, even when every instinct screamed yes. Back at the Abbott Winters offices, Lily stood alone in the conference room, staring at a file she wasn't reading. Her mind was still with Kane. She hadn't seen him yet, hadn't spoken to him, but she knew it was only a matter of time. Victor's words echoed in her ears, not because she agreed with them, but because they awakened a fear she didn't want to admit. What if Kane was planning something? What if his return wasn't about love or closure, but revenge? And what if, despite everything, some part of her still cared? She hated herself for even considering it. But the past had a way of dragging itself into the present, no matter how far she tried to run. She closed the file, picked up her phone, and stared at Kane's contact for a long time. Then, finally, she sent a message, "We need to talk." And somewhere, in a hotel room cloaked in shadows, Kane smiled when he saw her name on the screen. Would you like me to continue this storyline next, perhaps with Lily confronting Kane face to face, or with Devon investigating Victor's real motives? I can also weave in how Gabriel, Kane's son with Tracy, plays into this shifting landscape if you want to link both plot threads. Let me know where you'd like to take the story next. Adam had never been one for coincidences, so when Claire appeared at the exact moment Victor's name was mentioned, he knew better than to brush it off as anything less than strategic timing. She played her role well, aloof but watchful, teasing but resolute, and yet Adam saw through it. He'd been her once, all righteous fire and sharp rebellion, eager to provoke the patriarch into a reaction. Now it was her turn to walk that dangerous line, and he couldn't help but admire her audacity even as he questioned her motives. You're enjoying this a little too much, he muttered with a dry smirk. Claire tilted her head. Maybe. But aren't you? And she wasn't wrong. Part of him relished watching the empire Victor had built begin to wobble under the weight of its own arrogance. But it was more than that, it was watching Claire push Victor's buttons the way no one had dared since Adam himself. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. Victor strode into the penthouse without invitation, as though the place still belonged to him, and his eyes swept over the room with disdainful curiosity. So, he said, voice laced with suspicion, you two plan to buy this place? Before Adam could answer, Kyle, sharp, exasperated, jumped in. Victor, you don't control every property in Genoa City. The old man's eyes narrowed. Why do you think I don't? The air thickened. Claire stepped forward, resting a hand on Kyle's arm, and whispered that they should leave. It wasn't a retreat, it was a warning. They didn't need to fight Victor head-on. Not yet. As they exited, Victor's attention turned back to Adam. There was no warmth in the room, only the chill of strategies unfolding. I have a new idea, Victor said flatly. Let Abbott and Kane destroy each other. No blood on our hands. Adam raised an eyebrow. Now that, he said with amusement, I can support. Victor gave a tight nod and reached for his phone. It's time Kane and I had a conversation. And just like that, the first domino tipped. Elsewhere at society, Audra was unraveling. On the surface, she was composed as ever, lipstick sharp, blouse pressed, eyes calculating. But inside, something was slipping. Across from her, Sally Spectra watched her with a mix of curiosity and caution. "So he pulled out of Vibrante completely?" she asked, already suspecting the answer. Audra nodded grimly. "And not just that. He wants everything back. Every dollar, every asset, every favor he pretended didn't come with strings." Sally leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I'm not trying to be rude here," she said, "but what did you think would happen? It's Victor Newman. He plays long games with short tempers." Audra didn't flinch. "This isn't just about business. It's about control. Victor wants a war, but he wants it on his terms. And Vibrante was just a way to tighten his grip around my throat." Her voice was low, venomous, but not panicked. "The thing is, I let him believe I was cornered. I never was." Sally tilted her head. "You're still playing the game, even now?" Audra's eyes flashed. "Always." And then, unexpectedly, Sally laughed. "You know," she said, "I think Kyle really does love Claire. That may be the only honest thing happening in this town right now." Audra's jaw tightened. Love doesn't matter. Not when reality hits her in the face. "I'll make sure she sees the truth, about Kyle, about Victor, about all of them." It was then that Sally shifted, her tone suddenly serious. "I'm worried about someone else entirely. Nate." Audra froze. "If Kyle or Victor tells him what you've been up to, what happened in Nice, you're going to lose him." For a moment, the mask slipped. Audra's lips parted, then closed again. Her voice was quiet. "Nate will never know what happened in Nice." But even as she said it, the certainty she once held like armor was beginning to crack. She would have to tell Nate something. The collapse of her company was too big to hide. The question was whether the truth would be just another tool, or the blade that ended everything. Back at Newman Tower, Victor placed the call. Kane answered on the second ring, voice low and cautious. "Victor." "Let's meet," Victor said without pleasantries. "I have a proposition that may interest you. And if it doesn't, I'll make sure it does." Kane didn't answer right away. He knew Victor didn't waste time on small men, which meant this call was about power, legacy, and leverage. All of which Kane wanted more than anything. "Where?" he finally asked. Victor gave him the time and location, then ended the call without another word. Kane stood alone in his suite, the phone still in his hand, the weight of everything crashing down at once. He had returned to Genoa for many reasons: revenge, redemption, unfinished business. But now the game had changed. Victor wasn't just watching, he was moving pieces. And Kane needed to decide whether he would be a pawn or a player. At the Abbott house, Kyle was pacing. Claire stood at the window, her expression unreadable. "He's going to try to use us," Kyle said. "Victor always does." Claire turned slowly. "I know. That's why we have to strike first." Kyle paused. "You mean, take the deal?" Claire shook her head. "No. I mean take the risk. Let him think we're still figuring it out, then blindside him. We need Adam. We need Audra. We need every wild card on the table. The only way to beat Victor is to make him play his own game, and lose." Outside, Genoa City looked quiet. Calm. But beneath the surface, lines were being drawn, alliances tested, and truths manipulated. Kane was preparing to meet with Victor. Audra was preparing to lie to Nate. Claire was preparing to deceive her grandfather. And Adam, ever the outcast, ever the unpredictable, was watching from the shadows, waiting to decide who deserved to burn first. Let me know if you want the next part to cover Victor and Kane's meeting. Nate confronting Audra, or Claire's secret plan to sabotage Victor. This war is just beginning, and I can take it in any direction you'd like. Sally leaned back in her seat at Society, her wine glass catching a sliver of light from the overhead pendant. She had been watching Audra carefully ever since she sat down, the composed exterior, the strategic stillness, the micro-calculations in every response. But now, it was time to push. "Why don't you just tell Nate the truth?" she asked casually, though the undertone was razor-sharp. "Why not just say you realized Victor's not trustworthy and decided to walk away before he crushed you?" Audra blinked, but didn't look up. "Because that's not how it works with Victor. You don't walk away, you escape. If he thinks you've outplayed him, you become his next target. You know that." Sally raised an eyebrow. "Fine. Then spin it your way. Say something better came along. Because it has." Audra finally looked up, her gaze curious. Sally leaned in. "Billy signed off on a contract for Abbott Communications. If he takes back Chancellor, I'll be CEO. And I'll need someone who knows how to navigate messy waters. Someone who's not afraid of alliances shifting under their feet. Someone like you." The moment hung between them like a dare. Audra didn't respond right away. She traced the rim of her glass with one finger, buying time, choosing her words carefully. "It's a good offer," she admitted. "And it makes sense. But I need to make my next move for me. Not for Victor. Not for you. Not even for Nate. Just me." Sally didn't press. She knew better than to push Audra into a corner too soon. But the seed was planted. It only needed time to grow. Across the room, the atmosphere shifted as Kyle and Clare entered. Their presence was magnetic, sharp against the backdrop of polished floors and whispered conversations. Kyle's eyes landed on Audra and Sally almost instantly, and his jaw tightened. "Maybe we should go somewhere else," he murmured. Clare, however, stood her ground. "No. I want to speak to Audra." Her voice was calm, but her eyes flashed with purpose. She walked slowly toward the bar, her heels deliberate against the marble, and took the seat beside Audra without waiting for permission. Audra barely turned her head. "So formal," she said, her voice wrapped in silken ice. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Clare didn't answer immediately. She signaled to the bartender for water, then looked Audra directly in the eye. "I know what you're trying to do. The charger in the sleeper cab? That ridiculous lie about Kyle forgetting it? You're not even subtle anymore." Audra smiled, unbothered. "Did Kyle tell you nothing happened?" Clare didn't flinch. "He did." "Then he's lying," Audra said coolly. "Because something did happen." "You think he's going to admit that to you?" "Not if it means losing his golden future with the Newman princess." Claire's expression didn't change. She was calm, terrifyingly so. "Why would you make something like that up? Why try to sabotage something you don't even want?" Audra's mask slipped for just a moment, enough to reveal the fatigue beneath her armor. "I'm trying to help you." The words fell between them like a cracked mirror. Clare blinked. "Help me?" Audra nodded slowly. "You think you know what love is. You think Kyle is going to protect you from everything. But he won't. Because when it comes down to it, Kyle protects himself. Always has, always will. I've seen it. I've lived it. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because someone needs to say it before you fall too far." Clare didn't move. She didn't argue. But in her silence was the weight of something dangerous, not belief, not agreement, but the slow, simmering realization that Audra might not be lying, just not telling the full truth. Back at their table, Sally watched the exchange with interest. She knew Audra wasn't the type to unravel easily, which meant this meeting had purpose. Whatever was being said between those two women wasn't just personal, it was pivotal. She glanced back at Kyle, who was now distracted by a call from his assistant. He didn't notice the tightening grip Clare had on her glass, or the way her lips pressed into a thin line as Audra whispered something else, just out of earshot. By the time Clare returned to Kyle's side, something in her posture had changed, not visibly, not to anyone who didn't know her well. But Sally saw it. Clare had been shaken, and whether she showed it or not, something inside her was beginning to shift. Meanwhile, Victor was preparing his meeting with Kane, one that would set in motion a ripple effect across the entire power grid of Genoa City. In the Newman Tower, he reviewed the dossier Adam had slipped him, all of Kane's movements since his return, every conversation tracked, every unusual transaction noted. Victor was a master at finding the pressure points in every opponent, and Kane's were beginning to glow like red targets on a map. He picked up the phone again. "Have Mr. Ashby escorted to the private floor," he told his assistant. No interruptions. In her hotel suite, Audra returned later that night to find the silence unbearable. She poured herself a drink, the ice clinking too loudly in the glass, and stared out the window at the skyline. The truth she had told Clare was just the tip of what she was carrying. The real truth, the part that could ruin lives, was still locked away. What had happened in Nice would never be fully understood, not by Nate, not by Victor, not even by Sally. And yet, its echoes followed her like a curse. She had made choices. She had burned bridges. She had climbed over the broken pieces of herself to build something that still didn't feel like enough. And now, everything was teetering. If Nate found out, if Clare snapped, if Victor struck first, it would all come crashing down. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass. "Just a little longer," she whispered to herself. "Just hold it together a little longer." But outside the glass, the city never slept. And neither did its secrets.